Comparison is the thief of joy. One of the most brilliant phrases ever uttered. Some attribute it to President Teddy Roosevelt, others to Mark Twain. It doesn't really matter who said it first. What matters is that we all do it all the time. Our appearance, our wealth, our skills, our standing in the world. When you go to a dinner party at a friend's house, do you sit in their beautiful home, in their beautiful neighborhood, at their beautiful table, and compare it to yours? The furniture? I always laugh about the table because, as I've told you before, we don't have a dining room table. I would argue no one likes comparing themselves to others because it's painful. You can see a thin model type and tell yourself, I could starve for a year and never look like that. We see a happy couple and ask why our relationship can't be that way. Comparison is indeed the thief of joy. I always think about this around the high holidays. We're supposed to concentrate on ourselves. Basically, we aren't supposed to be worried about what anybody else is doing or has done. During this time, we're supposed to put on like spiritual blinders, blocking our view of what others need to repent for and only focusing on ourselves. In short, the high holidays are teaching us not to compare ourselves at all. The only person that we're meant to compare ourselves with is, in fact, ourselves, to become a better version in the year to come. As a society, I think we have a really hard time living up to this task. Social media is built upon the sport of comparison. We see with our own eyes how much prettier, happier, thinner, and richer everybody is than us. We all know it's fake. You know it's fake, right? Yeah, it's fake. Okay. But when someone tries to sell us a magic pill or the seminar that helped them get fit or rich or happy, the offer is enticing and we look at ourselves and say, maybe. But the subtext is, I want to be like them and I don't want to be like me. This is always the part that I find so sad. Inevitably, if you look outside yourself and only see people and lives you think are better, you are simultaneously putting yourself and your own life in a failure category, at the very least, a not up to par category. You did something wrong, you spent too little, ate too much, dated the wrong person, chose the wrong career. All of this is only according to yourself. Everything you see is less than, and it's your fault. It's not the best way to go through life, and for sure not the best way to start a new year. Personally, I have a theory about why everyone is obsessed with true crime shows and podcasts. Besides being fascinating stories that are hopefully nothing like your everyday life, we can compare ourselves to a psychopathic killer and say, I'm not that bad after all. I've never killed anyone. Book of life, here I come. Or take reality TV. Usually the people on those shows are total train wrecks. And I personally am so grateful that they are willing to display their lives on national TV so I can say to myself, wow, I've got it together. But ultimately, our parents and teachers taught us that's not nice, because comparison can also be the thief of kindness. You might argue that comparison fuels competition, which can be healthy. It can motivate people to want to do better and be better, and that's true. But me, like I'm sure many of you, I don't like competing with anyone but myself. And I am my own most brutal competitor. And raise your hand if you're your own worst kind of competitor / enemy. Yeah. But luckily, the essence of our holidays is in fact personal comparison. Who you were versus who you want to be. But I don't think that God ever intended us to beat ourselves up, even on Yom Kippur, when we say Ashamnu and literally kind of beat ourselves up. Because comparison can be the thief of tshuva. Whenever I know the Jewish holidays are close, this is where my mind goes. A New Year's resolution of mine, both secular and Jewish, is to stop comparing myself to others. Would I love to know what it's like to be able to reach things on the top shelf? Of course. But making myself feel bad because I have to climb to reach the top shelf makes no sense and gets me nowhere. Would you love a Land Rover? or maybe a house on the lake, or maybe you want one of those new electric cars traveling the world, whatever it is your dream is, someone will always have something you want. Someone will always have more. Someone will always have something that feels out of reach, and that will never change. We can spend our lives comparing ourselves and be miserable, or we can spend our lives enjoying what we have, no matter if it's old or tattered or out of style. I still have shoes from junior year of high school, and they are back. So no more keeping up with the Joneses. You don't really know what's happening in the Joneses' house anyway. No more praise for hustle culture. Never sleeping because you're always working or never seeing your family is not a badge of honor. Some people have to do it to get by. But for those who are hustling because someone else might outdo them, well, personally, I must be weak. I actually need to sleep and see my family. During COVID, all the parents I spoke with, and myself included, promised that we wouldn't return to living in our cars, shuttling our kids from activity to activity, never seeing each other because we were all so overbooked. We realized once we could be safely outside together that our kids just like playing and talking and swimming and sitting on the beach. They rode their bikes. So many of us enjoyed being in one place for more than 5 minutes. And yet here we are. Everyone jumped right back in. Why? Because if my kid doesn't do it, they won't be as good as the other kid, which means they won't get on the competitive team, which means they won't go to college, which means they'll end up in my basement. And we're doing the job of comparing our kids for them and deciding whether or not they're going to jump in the race, whether they really like it. Once they're teens, they do the comparison themselves, and it can be really damaging. Teens, like adults, have two worlds to compete in. Comparison in real life is enough, but social media is setting an impossible standard. How do you compete with filters and camera tricks? You can't, but it doesn't stop teens and adults from trying. During COVID 2020, both of my kids switched schools. What I realized is that there was no longer a long-term plan. I didn't know if the new schools would be good fits. They weren't even enrolled for a couple weeks, anywhere. I didn't know if they'd move schools again. I had planned on them being at Hillel through 8th grade. Turns out, I actually have felt better not having a plan. I dropped out. I don't compare my kids to other kids, and I have no clue what the future holds. And I have to tell you, at the beginning, it was pretty scary. But now it feels quite liberating. We take things year by year and sometimes semester by semester, and I don't know what everyone else is doing. Because I need to know what's best for my kids, and I don't compare them to anyone else. Because in our case, comparison would have been the thief of achievement. I'm proud and happy to report that they are both doing well at their new schools. Even our ancestors would have been derailed by comparing themselves to their peers. Can you imagine if Moses compared himself to Aaron? Aaron got a whole initiation ceremony. Moses got a bush. Aaron wears vestments meant for royalty and all kinds of jewels and is surrounded by gold and silver. Moses wears a robe and walks with a stick. Had Moses compared himself to his brother and thought he couldn't measure up, we might still be sweating in Egypt or the desert right now. I never really meant for this to be like a quasi-high holiday sermon. It could be the result of the fatigue I feel from being so busy again, emotional, spiritual, and physically. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are over, but there's still Sukkot and Simchat Torah. Tradition tells us that we should basically break our fast and then rush to build our Sukkot. So basically Judaism is saying rest, don't eat a lot, build a structure, eat and drink in it, then dance, dance, dance. It's kind of a hectic schedule. And in the midst, nothing stops. My kids insist on eating, have clean clothes. My dog insists on going outside. Nothing stops. But I love Sukkot. It's my favorite holiday because we get to surround ourselves with people we love, eat good food, drink good wine, and let the wind change the character of our sukkah with every gust. We can learn a message about comparison from Sukkot. No matter how perfectly we decorate or how perfect the meal, nature and life, forces beyond our control, will inevitably bring change, and we need to adjust, not compare our Sukkot to our neighbors. Maybe their sukkah is still standing after a storm and yours is not. Maybe your sukkah was filled with happiness and laughter and joy, and theirs was empty of those things. God never intended for our holidays and celebration to be points of comparison, just points of connection. So through Sukkot and beyond, don't let comparison steal away anything from you. You prefer PJs to parties? Great. Your kids still enjoy playing outside instead of team sports? Good for them. You still prefer an actual book to some fancy e-reader? Me too. Anyone else? Book? Actual? Yeah, nice. In 5783, let you be you and let everyone else be everyone else, because you's pretty great. Shabbat shalom.